What is happening, y'all? Cowboy here, and welcome to the build update for my dual blades guide. Now, not much has changed with dual blades. The original build I had is still the best, but I have tested a couple other things, and I have 3 separate builds, the original and then 2 alternatives that I want to talk about today. Now, before we jump into the builds, just some quick updates and general dual blade tips. One thing that I've started doing, which I didn't notice before, is out of a perfect dodge where we get our empowered demon mode, we can actually hit Y and do screw slicer and follow this up on any dodge, and we can do this in either demon or archdemon. I haven't seen a lot of people doing this. I only noticed it myself probably about 50 hours ago, and I've been doing it a lot on stream and hunts, but it just adds a crazy layer of mobility to dual blades on top of how agile we already are. So definitely keep an eye out for that. I think a lot of people just aren't noticing it because you only get that when you have the empowered dodge buff up. The other thing I want to talk about is shortening our blade dance combo. Now, I actually talked about this back in the original dual blade guide, but I just want to touch on this again because I see a lot of people overcommitting with dual blades. Now, typically for our full combo, we would go blade dance, and then from there we can go demon flurry, and then blade dance, and then demon flurry, and then blade dance. And that's still a good combo. If the monster is knocked down, that is going to be by far one of our best damage options. But the problem here is that when we start up blade dance, I'm spamming dodge right now, and that's a long commitment for a weapon that really wants to maintain that dodge buff. So unless you have a topple or a knockdown and you're going to be able to get that full combo, start it in archdemon instead, which is, you know, demon. Archdemon is where we have the gauge filled up, because from here we can just go demon flurry, blade dance, demon flurry, blade dance, and it's still going to be high commitment, but the difference is starting it from here, you know, I can't dodge, whereas if I'm starting it from here, I can dodge out of that very quickly. So just keep in mind, you know, you might not want to go for the full commitment, just depending on the situation, because the biggest thing is maintaining that dodge buff. You can see we're up at 254 right now, and that buff will fall off in 3 seconds here, and we're going to drop quite a bit. So from 254 down to 213, and it's just, you know, you want to maintain that combo. That combo is huge. So getting that perfect dodge up is going to be a bigger priority over trying to do the full demon dance combo. But either way, let's talk about the builds. Now, I have 3 separate builds we're going to be taking a look at today. We have the first, which is my go-to, and that is the burst gore variant build. We have a burst variant build that has no gore for people that don't like gore, and then we have a maximum LE version of the build that basically sacrifices some of the utility stuff like evade window, stuff like evade window and constitution. Now, real fast, just to cover all 3 of these, I've already gone ahead and crunched the numbers to make things simple. But so the first one is burst gore. You can see we're coming in at 287 raw, 663 element, 30 affinity. And I think that's going to be the comfiest option available. It's just, you know, we have solid raw, we have solid element, we have solid affinity in it, and it just feels good to run. We have the evade window with that build, which is really nice, and that's ultimately what makes it my favorite. The second option is burst with no gore. Now, we're going to come in with a little bit less raw because we're not getting the additional raw buff, but we do pick up a little bit of element. At the same time, we are losing the crit buff that we get from gore, the 25%. However, we are able to fit more Wex into that build. So if you just really don't like gore, if you don't like that play style, and for some reason you're uncomfortable with it, the second build may be the best option for you. Lastly, we have the third build. This one is a burst variant that still works with gore, but we are sacrificing certain pieces to really ramp up the element even further. So we get up to 692, we are at 279 raw, we have the 30% affinity, and that build has the highest damage potential. However, it's not going to have evade window, and so, you know, you're going to really have to be on top of your dodges. So those are the numbers for the 3 builds, and now we're going to go through each of them in order. And so the first one, this is my general recommendation. This is what we had back in the dual blade video. We go Ebony Helm Beta, Gore Male Beta, Gore Van Braces Alpha, Gore Coil Beta, and then Gore Greaves Beta with a Chain Charm. In terms of your mantle, I would recommend Corrupted Mantle over Evasion. Evasion gives us a nice damage buff, but it really doesn't last that long, and so Corrupted Mantle is just going to have a lot more uptime on top of increasing both our attack and our affinity. But so in terms of decos, Chain, Sane, we're going to need some Phoenixes. We're going to need a physique here. Growth, though you don't need growth. You could go for whatever you want with this slot. I just think growth is one of the better ones because I'm playing solo, even though most of the time it's not activating. But, you know, you could go for growth. You could go for shockproof, whatever you want there. And the nice thing about this is that we pull it all together. We have evade window up at 3. We have Constitution up at 5, which I think is very synergistic because we want to be able to get those dodges to get our empowered dodge buff up. We have Black Eclipse level 2, and we have Adrenaline. So if for some reason we get low, our stamina consumption is going to get reduced even further. Now, one of the variants to this, if you want to swap out and go for Gore Vambrace's beta, the build is going to be near identical. The biggest difference is our Constitution goes down to 3 and our evade window goes up to 4. And this is very much going to be just a preference type thing. Personally, I'd rather have the extra 20% stamina reduction on my dodges over one more level of evade window, but either of these options are going to be fine. And from a functional perspective, the build is going to be identical. On the weapon, so for the weapon, obviously we're going to be going Ardian on the weapon. You're going to be wanting to roll attack, and then 4 element sharpness would be ideal. Now, in terms of what you should go for, because obviously getting 4 element and sharpness is just an RNG game, you probably have a better chance of winning the lottery. I would keep a dual blade that has at least 2 element boost on it, but ideally you should try and aim for 3. And I would really prioritize getting at least 1 sharpness on it, because dual blades will absolutely chew through sharpness. If you don't get sharpness though, we can change up our deco configuration a little bit to help offset that. But this is what I would consider to be a perfect elemental Ardian dual blade. Now, going into the decos, for this, we're going to want Enhancer and our Element. So we're running with water here, so Enhancer Stream, Razor Sharp Stream, and then Crit Element Stream. Now, Crit Element isn't particularly good at the moment because our elemental thresholds aren't really all that high. But regardless, it's basically free because we're going stream, stream, stream. So that's coming in. And so there's no reason to not have Crit Element. Now, if you just don't like Crit Element, or alternatively, if you weren't able to get sharpness boost, instead, you could go like Stream Handicraft, Razor Sharp Handicraft, Enhancer Handicraft, and that's going to give you enough Handicraft in the build to offset not having a sharpness boost on the weapon. So that's a alternative that I wanted to touch on. And then besides that, we already covered the decos down here. Like I said, I would consider this to be the best of the group in terms of our raw damage and elemental damage. I think it's the most balanced. And then having Evade Window 3 and Con 5 feels very, very comfortable. Moving on from there, though, to the Burst No Gore option. Now, this one, as you can see, we have Burst up at 5, we have Wex up at 4, we pick up Divine Blessing, and we have Elemental Absorb and only 1 point of Coalescence. Now, the biggest difference here is Elemental Absorb is going to give us a flat 40, 50, and 60 element for each point in Elemental Absorb. And then Coalescence is going to give us roughly 30% of our element at level 3. The maths on it is a little bit wonky, but in general, if your element is higher, Coalescence will always beat out Elemental Absorb. So the other big thing is Elemental Absorb. We can get that off of a perfect dodge, which is nice. We don't need to get hit. You can perfect dodge through stuff, you can perfect guard stuff, and that will still proc Elemental Absorption. And when that goes up, it is a 2-minute long duration, but then it is down for 90 seconds. And because of that, I do think Coalescence tends to pull ahead because we're getting Coalescence off of defeating the Gore Magala buff. We're getting it anytime we get hit by something, you know, a stray piece of fire, a stray piece of poison. It's very easy to constantly have something to proc Coalescence every 30 seconds. It's not that big of a concern. Whereas Elemental Absorption, it's nice that it's just, you know, set and forget and it's up for 2 minutes, but then you have another minute and a half where you're not getting that elemental boost. So this is kind of a lazy option. As you saw earlier with the damage, it's definitely going to be comparable in terms of the decos. We don't have a lot of deco slots here, so Phoenix, Growth Protection, and Tenderizer. So it is kind of nice picking up Divine Blessing, but we don't really have the Constitution with this build, and we don't have the Evade Window with this build, but you don't have to worry about the Gore buff, and we have Haste and Recovery. So if you're still learning dual blades and you're like, you know, I'm not comfortable dealing with Gore and trying to perfect dodge everything, I think this is a very cozy, safe build because we do have Divine Blessing to help when you're getting hit, and we do have Haste and Recovery, so you have some healing coming in. But overall, I think it is outperformed by the prior build and the next build. Now, the final one is the Ellie No Evade Window. And now this is very similar, but we work Gore back into the mix. We're still keeping the 2-piece Arc Vulcan here and the Ebony Bracers. And the idea with this is we are aiming to max Burst, have max Elemental Absorb, and try to get some points of Coalescence into the build. And so in terms of just maximizing our element returns, this is on average going to get us the highest element possible. We are picking up Black Eclipse and Hasten Recovery, so it does have a little bit of that comfort of the prior build, but we are losing Divine Blessing with this. We only have 2 points of Constitution, and we don't have any Evade window, and so a lot of things that I would consider to be comfort skills or good quality of life are going to be absent. But in terms of just the raw elemental damage output, I would say this is likely the highest possible. You might be able to swap things around a little bit, essentially drop, go here and drop this final point of elemental absorption, and instead work in more coalescence. So, you know, and that's a very easy swap out. You know, we go from Arc Falcon Alpha to Arc Falcon Beta. I mean, literally just doing that. And you can, we don't need that extra chain jewel, so you could just go there and swap this in, and then boom, you know. Now we're just Coal 3, LE Absorb 2, which this would actually probably pull higher element, but once again, that's going to come down to coalescence or elemental absorption preference. It's functionally the same thing. It's the same piece of armor, just the beta variant compared to the alpha. And, you know, we are still getting the weakness exploit. So from a functional sense, we're just trading one skill out for the other. But regardless, like I said, I'd say, while I like these two builds, this is my main go-to setup, and this is what I'm running across all of my dual blades, with the only difference between them being different weapons and different elements. But overall, I think all of these builds are going to be viable. It really just comes down to minor preferences, but I'm a big fan of Evade window because, like I said, I mean, we're sitting at 213 right now, and then we get off that single perfect dodge, and, you know, boom, we're up at 259. And so I'd rather have the Evade window to make it easier to get that buff over having more potential damage in another area, but it's harder to get that buff. So either way, that is going to cover the overview of the builds. Let's jump in and do a hunt. So we're going to head out and fight a Gravios. One thing I should mention, though, is, you know, how we talked about you can swap in the gloves and pick up an extra point of Evade Extender and go down to Con 3. That would technically be the best option if you are constantly eating for stamina. So there are food skills which will reduce your stamina usage, and you can eat for that and basically get the equivalent of Con 5, but obviously this involves making sure that you are constantly farming the mushrooms to have that buff up anytime you're hunting with dual blades. So a little bit more situational, but it is an available option for those that want to go for it and really aim to just maximize their potential. This Gravios is getting worked. Oh, I was trying to dodge through that. It's okay. Ooh, bro got worked. Not as fast as my last kill on him, though. Last time I came in against this thing, it was a like a 236. But I'll still take a sub 3. Not too bad, not too bad. And you can see on the damage chart there, huge amount of elemental damage. 9,800 elemental damage pumping out from the dual blades. But yeah, like I said, very, very comfortable build. And I like that there's a little bit of flexibility in this. You know, real fast, just for the sake of showing it off in a hunt. You know, we're only at 15 minutes. Let's do, I think I have 2 more against him. Let's do 1 more and we'll show the same hunt, but with another one of the builds. Alright, so we are pulling out the second build I showcased, and this is the one that, like I said, is a little bit more beginner friendly. We're not worried about... We're stuck with it. This one, no coalescence to worry about, no gore. I can get like a single fire attack off of him. On use your breath. There we go. Now we got Ellie absorb up. And as long as this hunt takes, that should last for the entire duration of the hunt. Poor guy, man. Bro, he's just getting juggled. And that one came in at 316. Now, we actually ended up dealing more elemental damage there, which does make sense because it was a 316 hunt and we had Ellie absorb up for, you know, over half the hunt, so maintaining that Ellie boost. But even then, because we had just a little bit less raw affinity compared to what we would have had with the Gore setup, the hunt overall did end up coming in a little bit slower. But either way, still a really good hunt. And like I said, man, when it comes to these builds, the difference between them is so minor. You know, we're looking at like sub-minute differences between the builds. So, you know, when people are like, oh, you gotta play meta. No, man, like it's such an insanely minor difference. Just play with whatever build you're enjoying more. I tend to really like the extra evade window in Constitution, which is why I do that. But, you know, if you don't feel you need that, or you're not a fan of dealing with Gore, or whatever the case is, any of these builds are going to do just fine. So either way, thanks for coming on by. We're going to wrap this one on up, and I will catch y'all soon with another updated weapon setup.